everybody. This is Dr. Sherry Taul again, and today we are going to work through the dissection of the sheep heart. I thought first of all we would start with a picture of the sheep heart just to discuss some of the parts of it and to see how blood flows through the sheep's heart. Now, the main function of the heart is to act as a pump to pump blood through the body. Its main job is to collect oxygenated blood and send it out to the body so the oxygen can be used for the body's resource, and then once it's used up, bring that blood back to the heart so it can filter it through the lungs and collect up some more oxygen and get rid of the carbon dioxide and start over again. So this is a basic picture, basic diagram of the heart. The heart in the sheep, which is very similar to the human heart, is divided into 4 chambers. We have a right atrium, a right ventricle, a left ventricle, and a left atrium. These are the 4 different chambers inside the heart. And then we have a whole conglomeration of different blood vessels, arteries, and veins going into and coming out of the heart to send the blood in the right direction, track it out. So generally, let's start with how blood is going to come into the heart. We have it coming into the heart from 2 different directions. We've got the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. And these blood vessels are collecting blood from outward in the body, and one's going to be coming from the nose end of the sheep and the other's kind of coming from the rear end of the sheep, so it's bringing all the blood from around the body back into the sheep's heart. They're going to come in here and they're both going to empty into the right atrium. That's the first little area of the heart where blood is going to come in. The blood is going to slip through the atrioventricular valve on this side of the heart. We call it a tricuspid valve, and it's going to then fall into the right ventricle. The right ventricle will send the blood up through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary artery, the pulmonary trunk. It will send the blood out into the lungs. Once it leaves the pulmonary artery, the blood goes out into the lungs, and the lungs are kind of sitting around the heart here in this area, and it will send the blood out there. It'll go through the tiniest little vesicles out there and pick up all the oxygen and release the carbon dioxide and collect as much carbon dioxide as it can to bring back to the body. So then after it picks up the oxygen out in the lungs, it's going to come back into the heart through the pulmonary veins. It's going to bring it back in, and it's going to have be very well oxygenated now, and all these are going to drop into the left atrium. After they get into the left atrium, it will slip through an atrioventricular valve, known as the mitral valve on the left side, and drop into the left ventricle. The left ventricle will then contract and push that blood through the aortic valve and out the aorta. After the blood hits the aortic area, it will shoot out into different branches all throughout the body again. So we'll be going through the cadaver heart. Hopefully we'll be able to see all these different areas, pick up on some of the valve, and kind of study a little bit about some of the muscle that we see in the heart. We need to remember that a heart is a muscular pump. It's constantly contracting. We know our own heart beats, and that is with each contraction we get a beat. We kind of hear a thump as these valves snap shut and blood smacks against them, and we kind of hear the thump, thump, thump of the heartbeat. And we have to remember that part of the blood going into the right side of the heart is not very good as far as oxygenated blood, but it sends it out to the lungs to pick it all up, pick up that good oxygen, get rid of that carbon dioxide, and send it back to the left side of the heart where it can shoot it back out to all of the body. one thing we will notice that the left side of the heart, because it has to send the blood throughout the whole body, it's going to be a lot thicker, a lot bigger, a lot stronger muscle on this side of the heart than we'll notice on the right side of the heart, because the right side of the heart doesn't have to work quite as hard. It doesn't need quite the pressure to send blood just right out to the lungs that are very close by, as compared to the left side of the heart that has to send the blood out throughout the whole body, all the way to the tip of that tail and the bottom of those little hooves and out to the tip of the ears. It's got a big job sending that blood throughout all of the body. So this is the basic flow of blood through the heart, just coming in, going from one chamber to the next, shooting out to the lungs, and coming back in from one chamber to the next and shooting out to the body. So blood is constantly making a path through that heart and getting back to the body. Okay, so if we come over here to our cadaver hearts, we have two here. One I've started a little dissection on, and the other one here to look at the outside of the heart. If we look at around here, you will see the heart isn't a perfect circle. You can kind of see it is more shaped like a Valentine heart, and it's not perfectly symmetrical. One side, the left side, tends to be a little bit thicker, a little bit bigger than the right side, but fairly uniform when you're looking at it from the outside. If you're just trying to locate areas of the heart, we'll see this little beige brownish area right here. This little flappy part here is called a left auricle. That's an auricle, and really right underneath this area here is the atrium that's in the heart. So we have the left atrium right here on this side. And all underneath this, all this area down in here is the ventricle of that side of the heart. And if we roll the heart over here, you can see this area over here being the left auricle and the left atrium area. Up here is the right side. Kind of trace it around here, so you can see they're not really right next to or side by side. They're kind of in a more upward presentation here. And then this side down here is the ventricle of the right heart. It's all under this side here. So we've got right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle, looking on the outside of the heart. The other thing we can look for on the heart, it's a little hard to see on this sample, but we have coronary arteries and veins that run on the outside to supply the muscle with blood and the nutrients that it needs to work. And these kind of little indentations running through here are kind of all the branches of the coronary artery to supply the heart. And on, let's see, we'll flip it over here, the back side, we'll go through these a little more in depth on the model that's open, but we have here all the major blood vessels that go in. Here's a nice big open one that go in. These are all our arteries and veins that are either bringing blood into the heart or sending blood out of the heart, and all in this area. So all over this top part of the heart, we have all the blood vessels that are going in and out of it. So that is pretty much the outside of the heart. This one have here, I went ahead and have made some cuts in it for you so you can we can go through kind of the inner parts of the heart. And again, just for orientation, this is left atrium. Left ventricle is going to be down here. Right atrium, right ventricle will be down here. And again, all of our, most of our blood vessels all up here in the top area that are sending blood into and out of the heart. Okay, so we'll start up here on the right side of the heart. Now, remember from our drawing, the right side of the heart is getting the blood that is not very good, not very rich in oxygen. It is coming in from outside of the body. We're coming in the caudal vena cava and the cranial vena cava, bringing blood into the heart where it can come in to collect its oxygen. So I have cut into the heart here, and you can see this little chamber here and the other half of it here. This is the right atrium. This is where blood is first getting deposited into the heart. I've cut it through here, so you can't really, I've kind of destroyed the valve that was here, but there's kind of a valve here separating one chamber to the next. And as it leaves this atrium area, it drops into the ventricle. And this here is the right ventricle of the heart. All this chamber all back in here and all down in here. So you can see that the ventricles are much larger areas than the atrium inside the heart. Things that we can look for in the right side of the heart, this AV valve, the valve between the atrium and the ventricle, is called the tricuspid valve. You may notice the some of these stringy areas here. These are what we call chordae tendineae. They actually attach this valve here that I've kind of cut through, so it's kind of hard to appreciate, but they are attached to the valve to the muscle, which is a papillary muscle and that when they pull, that is what is keeping those valves open and shut to allow blood to drop from one chamber to the next, or to help send it on to the next area that it needs to travel. So we have the atrium, the papillary muscle. These are the chordae tendineae that help move these valves in the area. Okay, so after blood is sent into the right ventricle, it's then going to make its way to the pulmonary trunk and be sent to the lungs. So once the blood is sent to the lungs, it'll come out and pick up the oxygen, drop off the carbon dioxide, and come back into the heart. Only it's not going to go to the right side, it's going to traverse back in here to the left side. So if we open up the left side of the heart, we'll see it looks very similar, but we have the atrium up in this area here, all up in here. And this valve actually stayed a little nicer than on the other side. Here is our valve. And on the left side of the heart, this is called the mitral valve, but both of them are considered atrioventricular valves. We have the chordae tendineae that attach to the valve down to the papillary muscle, which controls the flapping of them valves. So after blood leaves this atrium chamber, it drops into the ventricle. And then when blood is made its way into the ventricle, it is then going to be shot up through the aorta and back out into the body. Let's see, let me find our blood vessels here. This one's a little bit nicer than the other. We have pulmonary artery and vein here, our aorta here, and our vena cava here. So since blood is leaving the ventricle and going out the aorta, if we put our probe down in here, let's see if we can send it, yeah, right through here. So you can see blood will be leaving the ventricle and get sent right up through the aorta to come back out to all areas of the body. And if we cut through the valve separating the atrium and the ventricle, we may be able, let's see here if we can catch a glance of the valve that is in the aorta. You have an aortic valve too. It's way up in there, but there it is right there. So we have another valve in there. One interesting thing about hearts and especially heart problems in sheep, if you have problems with a valve or problems with a given area of the heart being a muscle can somewhat change and try to adapt to improve the blood flow that it is sending out to the body. So sometimes with certain problems, say you have a problem with this area being a muscle, it will try to grow, try to enlarge, to be more efficient in sending blood out to the rest of the body. So if we would happen to take an x-ray or do an echocardiogram or something on this heart, we can actually look at the shape of the heart and see changes in the heart that lets us know that there is a problem with a certain area. Sometimes too, even just listening with a stethoscope, you can pick up on problems in the heart, especially with these different valves that are in here. If you have a problem with a valve, they kind of make a funny sound when you're listening to it with a stethoscope. So a lot of times you can pick up kind of where the problem is in your heart by the sound that the heartbeats are making. And also, again, by looking at an x-ray or an echocardiogram and determining the shape of the heart and the blood flow through the heart and how things are progressing. So again, that is the basic dissection of the sheep heart. We'll just run through the picture one more time now that you've seen this. Hopefully it'll make a little more sense to you. So blood is coming in from all the way from the nose and all the way from the tail, coming into the vena cavas and coming into the right side of the heart. They will slip through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle will give a big tight squeeze and send that blood on out to the lungs. After it's collected up its oxygen from the lungs, it will come back into the pulmonary veins, drop into the left atrium, slip past your mitral valve into the left ventricle, and give one big good push and push that blood back out into the body. And one more thing I think is kind of interesting